Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Reacher, Season 2, Episode 5. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we had that opening where you could tell Reacher doesn't say anything about it. I mean, he comments on, because we get to meet O'Donnell's family, his wife, his two kids, and they're kind of rambunctious, and his wife's getting everything together. It's like, right, burn a phone, don't call your parents, don't call your sister, because you know she puts everything on Facebook. But she's kind of like ready to kind of tackle everything, which is interesting, because I guess it's a situation where it's like, I guess with the nature of what he does for what he did for a living and stuff like that, you just naturally are prepared, like, you know, contingencies in case like shit really hits the fan type of situation. But I think it's because even Reacher commented on how it's fascinating that she took that with stride, and it's like, right, she accepts reality as it is. But because O'Donnell was like, yeah, she has a nurse for a mom, and her dad was like a Chicago fire department, was part of the Chicago fire department. She just couldn't get that out. So I think it's kind of supposed to be like, right, she does well under pressure type of situation, but it just be so comical and collected, especially, well, because she wants to know what the danger is, and it's like, nah, like, for you guys at 4 tops, but it's like, what about you guys? And Donald knows not to say anything. It's like, yeah, like, half of her friends are already dead, so she probably knows that, but he's probably not, I mean, not unless those are some of the details he's, like, leaving out. But I think when you look at Reacher looking at all of it, yes, it's rambunctious, yes, it's chaos, but I think that's chaos he doesn't think is in the cards for him. But I think there's a little bit of him being like, yeah, because O'Donnell and him have had that conversation about, you know, getting a little slice of life. It's just like he's kind of been on his own, and he acts like it's okay. No one who really, I mean, you can be fine on your own, but up to a certain extent. Like, we are meant to be, like, you know, some companionship is nice in life. I don't, you know, I'm not going to fully say it's necessary, but it's like, no, we are beings that need to be surrounded by people, having people in our lives, you know, that companionship is nice having. And, you know, Reacher just goes from place to place, person to person type of situation. So having this like home life, yeah, it looks crazy, but you can tell, like, I feel like there's just a little bit there where it's just, you can tell, like, yeah, it's not too bad, you know. He's kind of talked about it with O'Donnell before, about like, yeah, that life not being cut out for him, but still it not being too bad on the all in all, even though he probably would never outwardly admit that aspect of it. So staying on the O'Donnell and Reacher front, they eventually go and meet. I thought that would have been more scenes we would have gotten Reacher talking to people from Joe's team, but he's, you know, it almost feels poetic that the show not make a big deal out of it, because Reacher himself wouldn't make a big deal out of it. So I'm assuming these are people that are on him, or at least they worked with Joe. Maybe they're not directly part of the same unit, the same thing that him and Molly Gordon were a part of, but it was because they talked about like the way Reacher approached everything, and they're like, yeah, the same thing you said is exactly what your brother says. Like, man, you're a lot like him. And it's just, you can just see like those words, just like how they hit Reacher, and he just kind of like, he tries to shrug it off like it doesn't matter. But even then, he's like, right. They're like, well, we arrest these guys, make sure they all go down. Reacher's like, not unless we kill them first. And it's like, yep, just like his brother, which is so, because we haven't gotten enough of his brother to really know that, but we gotten a little bit of his brother, like, you know, when they were younger, and obviously when they're older. But to know they're so two peas in the pod, that like the way Jack is just the way his brother was. I'm sure it also, he's probably able to compartmentalize, because hey, I'm here around people who know my brother. So once again, he tries not to um talk in that conversation. Like, so they bring up the parent comparisons to Joe. He doesn't like push on it. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't fake smile. He just kind of like, it's almost like you see him almost kind of get sucker punched by it, because it's almost like it hits hard. Like, but he's trying to act like it doesn't. He's trying to be like, I got to push it down, push it down, push it down, and move forward. Because obviously we learned a little bit more about AM. Obviously they still don't know his name, just the different aliases. But he goes back to like 6 years ago when he was trying to, like, wasn't it like mustard gas he was trying to sell to somebody? But they ended up busting up the operation. But AM's the only one that managed to get away. They don't know what his ideology is, other than money. Money speaks and money talks. That's all he cares about. So he's a middle ground person that's like, I'm not doing this because I believe in an ideology. I go after those who have their own ideology, because I know they will pay any amount of money for my services. So that's all. That's the only. for some people, money is the only god that exists for them. So I think it's potentially that type of situation. But that's really all the information they ended up getting on that front. They're supposed to kind of share whatever they know, but Reacher's not the biggest on sharing in general, but definitely not information unless it's 100% necessary, i.e., any situation with Finley, Roscoe, or even more recently with Russo. I'd even argue with the rest of the team. We'll talk about some of that Lavoie stuff later on, but shifting gears over to Dixon and Neely, they happen to show up at the hardware place where the missiles are being made too late because they're already shipped out. And I was like, the moment we saw the truck, I was like, oh, okay. Because they were talking, like, AM was talking to some guy a couple episodes back about, like, you can hit this. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's an ambush. But we never quite found out what that was about because it's like, but it was like, it was implying like it was going to be an ambush or something. But I at the time, I was like, is it an ambush to get weapons? Which ultimately it was. But I was thinking, like, more like armed, like, guns and stuff. I wasn't thinking missiles at the time. But, because I thought at the time, like, oh, 650 for, like, yada, like six for 100K each or whatever. I was thinking, like, at the time I was thinking, like, right, it's the circuitry. It's not the circuitry, it's just the missiles themselves. But right, the whole thing was a ambush to get the truck, which the lead guy who leads the ambush against the truck, I kept looking like, why does he look so familiar? And I pulled up IMDb and his name is Sean Beck. I'm probably like butchering his name, but I was like, he looks familiar. And I saw he was in Killjoys. I was like, who are you? And I stared at his face for a little bit. I was like, yeah, you're Fancy. Yeah, he plays a character named Fancy. He looks exactly the same. Only difference is, as Fancy, he had like longer hair and he'd keep part of his hair in a ponytail on the back. But he had the same beard and everything. It was weird seeing some of his photos where it's like he has the same length hair he has as his character, but he was clean shaven. I've only known him with the beard and long hair, so it's just kind of fun. Either way, I just thought that was neat. I was like, Fancy! Which is just interesting because another person connected to Killjoys, because Home Dude from season 1 was also connected to Killjoys as well. But one thing, it's just funny how stuff like, but to be fair, I think that's just a Canadian actor thing. Like, you'll see a lot of familiar faces in that regard, because a lot of stuff on Sci-Fi, I think, I don't know if it's a Canadian channel. I think it's an American channel. It might be a Canadian channel, because I think a lot of its shows are like Canadian. Or at very least, I was about to say shot in Canada. A lot of stuff is shot in Canada. I even think this show is shot in Canada, because I think it's probably like the cheaper place to shoot, but it fills in for so many places, especially here in the U.S. So, because a lot of CW stuff films there, like I said, I'm going on a whole tangent, but sorry about that. But yeah, they got all 650 missiles. Luckily, sadly, Neely and Dixon didn't get there in time because, they ran into the ambush but took everyone else down. I don't know, something smooth about Neely coming out the back seat shooting the guy and Dixon coming out the trunk and shooting the guy. The last guy got it so hard. I mean, if you look at where the bullet wounds are, Home Dude got shot in the ass like twice. I was like, Jesus. Like, in the left cheek. It's like, jeez. But the other guy ended up getting away. So now they end up having to break the news. Like, cool, we have bad news and we have worse news. Bad news, those 650 missiles are on the road and we have no idea where they're going. 2, we found the billings or whatever, and the person who hand delivered to make sure this all went down smoothly was Swan himself. So now Reacher has no choice but to accept Swan is involved in this. But he's like, right, it could have been so unfortunate his signature. It's like, no, it was a thumbprint biometric thing. It's like, then like someone could have forced his hand. It's like, there's so many layers of security. Like, everyone in New Age would have to be in the know about it. You'd have thousands of employees be all about this evil, like, plan they've got. So, once again, Arkham's Razor. Either the entire company's in on it, that's the only way he'd be able to get through all these check marks throughout the building without issue if he was being forced to, or he's in on it, and Reacher doesn't want to believe that. And even O'Donnell was like, what are you going to do if you told those guys back there you would kill everyone involved? Does that include Swan? And he's conflicted because we get that flashback when they were undercover following the drugs, like they were trying to make a sale, trying to bust these guys so they can get their suppliers and stuff, but the operation goes sideways because one of the people there recognizes Swan, which I think is interesting. Probably not something you need to think too much about, but it's still it's interesting considering this drug thing keeps circling around Swan, because there's like, hey, there's that missing piece of drug. Oh yeah, no, Swan displayed it like it was nothing. Once again, at the time, Neely was like, that was kind of weird, but she didn't really push it. Now, in retrospect, she's kind of pushing it, and now it's like all this stuff compounding about Swan just doesn't look good for him. And it hits Reacher a certain way because it's like, right, the man literally took a bullet for me. I mean, yeah, barely missed his heart and hit his, like, his collarbone, but it's like, man took a bullet for me and I owe him. And once again, it's all the stuff that Neely had said previously of, you feel like this guy's a representation of you. So if you put him on the team, you feel responsible for our friend's death. Plus, you owe this guy. Not only was he a friend, he is someone that you literally owe your life to. Because once again, in Reacher's mind, it's a reflection of him because he considered himself a decent judge of character. And it's like, was I so completely wrong about Swan? Like, the fact of the matter is, he already feels the guilt of I wasn't there in everyone's lives. And maybe if I kept in touch with everyone, maybe I could have kept Swan from going down whatever route he went. Whatever led him to where he is now, I could have potentially stopped that. And a lot of our friends would still be alive if I'd probably kept in touch. Maybe I could have been the one that swerved Swan away from whatever he was mixed up in. Or maybe I wouldn't have brought him on board in the first place. Maybe it's like I got so attached to this team that I had blinders on to some of the faults. That maybe I didn't recognize the signs then. There were red flags that I completely ignored. Did I ignore them? Were they there? And now a lot of that's, like, I'm sure, rattling off in his brain. Because he, like I said, he considers himself a good judge of people, having a good instinct and gut for it. But it's like, what does that say if I was completely and utterly wrong about Swan? What does that say about me? What does that say about my gut? What does that say about my instincts, my judgment of people? Which, obviously, he doesn't always hit it out of the park. But generally speaking, he's very good at reading people. So later on, he gets taken by Lavoie's people. They don't even take him, which they probably could have, but that would have been more of an issue, and that would have turned into a whole public thing, and you didn't want it to. So I love that the Reacher's like, no, I'm not going. It's like, why? Because he didn't ask nicely. And the woman turns to him and is like, Hart, say the magic word. He's looking at her like, you're kidding. Wait, you're serious? He's like, please get in the car. And Reacher finally gets in the car. But he goes and meets Lavoie, and obviously Boyd's there too, like running his mouth, talking about all this stuff. It's like, oh, look at what you've done, what you've accomplished. But Lavoie was kind of like, hey, shut your mouth. This guy is a decorated soldier, all the good that he did. They also found out, because of their connections, they ended up finding out about what he did in Margraves. Obviously, like, they were able to keep him off the record and stuff, but they know that he participated in everything that went down in Margraves like 2 years ago. So for Lavoie, he's trying to look at this as a win-win situation. I kind of screwed the pooch because I cut through a whole bunch of red tape, and because of that, some terrorists are trying to come after the Little Wing Project. But the fact is that I think it's interesting because by that point, Reacher already knew about the missiles being taken. So I guess as long as they're not together currently, it's not as bad. It's still pretty bad. But he didn't let Lavoie know because it's like, well, you'll find out eventually, so why feed you information? Because I think he's still trying to determine whether or not he should work with Lavoie. It's like, yes, you have these power and connections, but you're a corrupt fuck. Like, the fact is, we wouldn't be in this situation if you hadn't cut through red tape. But he's trying to justify, hey, I did all this for my country, for our defense, and he's trying to speak to that soldier in Reacher that, fought for his country. And it's like, right, so you would understand better than anyone, but it's also a win-win. I can make it so you go after all these people and nothing can trace it back to you or your team, and you kind of get to disappear with no ramifications. Just like you were kind of able to walk away from the Margraves thing, you can have the same situation here. But I think it's interesting, like I brought up before, Reacher didn't tell anyone about it. He had multiple times, so at least on screen, we didn't see him talk to anyone about it. So he's probably keeping that close to the vest because he probably thinks it's stupid to let anyone know. But also as team leader, it's kind of on him to make those decisions. But it's like, yeah, you can kind of fill the rest of us in about that. Not like any of us will take this offer, but it is something to think about. Like, because he's a corrupt dude, do we really because all we would be doing is covering for his lapse in judgment and him kind of cutting through a lot of red tape and creating this situation in the first place, because he is going to get paid off of this, and that's why he's like, oh, it's a win-win all around. I get the benefit. I get to kind of crush any ties that connect me to all of this, because if this all literally, not just figuratively, literally blows up in my face, it would kind of tank my career and stuff when people find out I'm responsible for all this. So it's about distancing myself. I'm burning this all to the ground, like you did that whole counterfeiting situation in Margraves. Kind of do that same thing here. So I'm actually curious to see what Reacher does. I could definitely see him kind of screwing over Lavoie and making it so that, hey, I'm working with you, but secretly I'm going to take down this whole operation and you, and kind of tank your and destroy your whole career, take you and Boyd down. I could definitely, I feel like that could be the direction. I feel like that's more like Reacher's approach. Like, he might work with him enough to use him, enough to basically give him the rope to hang himself type of situation. So we'll see. The team ends up going to Franz's funeral because they finally, the coroner finally released his body, and now it's just this conversation about, you know, trying to track down those missiles before, you know, because the plan initially was to take the other truck, because they switched trailers, but they were going to take the other truck they had switched trucks to, you know, give swap trailers, but the other truck had like a whole bunch of bricks. They were planning on shipping that off so that it would have been weeks, maybe even months before the military, the army ever found out they were missing the weapons. At the same time, these terrorist organizations could be doing whatever they want, and we wouldn't even know where they got the weapons from. And it's like, yeah, they stole them out of our own backyard. I was about to say, what is Langston and them getting out of this other than a giant paycheck? But we found out that Langston and a lot of people that work at New Age are all corrupt cops that kind of got to like retire without, you know, any prosecution. And now Langston got hired at New Age, or I think he probably got hired there. Probably not a thing of he didn't start it. He just got hired there, and now he ended up hiring on all these other corrupt cops. So, like, on the security side of things, it's a whole bunch of other dirty cops. So that's where that all comes into play. They're just dirty cops just playing on a bigger field. It's like, right. Like, I'm not saying it's better, because I'm like, who knows what shady stuff they got away with on cop as just, you know, as precinct cops, but now like on this governmental level with the power and reach of like a large entity like New Age, and now I'm like working with like a terrorist like AM. It's just, man, that's kind of you know. But I guess it's like, right, if you're a piece of shit and when you're at the bottom, of course you're going to be a piece of shit when you get to the top. Or what I mean by the bottom, it's like you're on the lower end of like corruption. It's corruption's corruption through and through, but it's like you're on the lower end of the pedestal, the totem in this regard, where it's like you're just a cop versus like the connections and power of like government stuff you're able to interact with new technology. So it's just interesting. So that's kind of all their motivations end up being. They don't care who gets hurt as long as they get paid. Because Reacher and Russo had it out at each other's throats at the funeral, because Russo had given Franz's son a toy just to kind of make him feel better, and gave him this card that had like a saint on it. It's like, right, say this prayer on the back every night, and your dad will always kind of be with you a little bit. And he even said, like, yeah, I liked it. He's like, when I was your age, I liked Aquaman. Once again, ironic and funny, considering, like, part of me is like, you know, they had to write lines like that specifically because, hey, Alan was Aquaman many moons ago. So it's got to be written specifically for stuff like that. But either way, it's like, right, he could talk to fishes, and I thought that was so cool because I wanted to talk to my dog. It's also interesting timing too, because obviously the newest timing wise, because it's like the newest Aquaman movie came out, so it's like interesting timing too. But Reacher kind of like, to be fair, I think he's in a flux of emotions. They're at Franz's funeral, plus just this whole thing about Swan, and now he's wondering whether or not he could trust Russo, because he's like, bro, those bikers that attacked us, the only person that knew where we were was you. But to be fair, later on, it's like, right, you most likely have a rat at your precinct. It's most likely his lieutenant. That's typically how that goes. It's not going to be, because the only person he's probably interacted with is his lieutenant, because it seems to be that's the only person he really tells them date by date, like, update. So I don't know if he's always been dirty, or did he only recently get caught up by New Age. Well, since we know they're dirty cops, like, his lieutenant might have connection to Langston in them. There might be some like, oh, we were in some dirty stuff back in the day, you stayed on a job, but us, we moved on. Or maybe he's just getting some kickback now. I don't know. But it feels like it's pretty, because we haven't seen this lieutenant since a couple episodes ago when he chewed Russo out. But I'm like, yeah, he seems like the most obvious choice. But yeah, like I said, like I think because of all that stuff, Reacher was kind of going for the jugular with Russo, but he's like, don't call me a dirty cop. He takes offense to that because he's like, my dad was a cop. He was a good guy, and he's like, the reason why I reached out to Mikey Franz's son is because I know what it's like to look out the window with every passing headlight, wishing and hoping that it's your dad coming home. Even though you know on some level it's not going to happen, that's still that hope you're holding out for. He's like, I know that feeling, and I want to do whatever I can to help that kid because I was that kid when I was his age. And even Reacher, without apologizing, goes, yeah, I didn't know that about your kid. It's like, yeah, there's a lot you don't know, you jackass. And also it's like, right, but the only person that's a part of New Age, like, security team, everyone else is dirty cops, precinct cops, except for Swan. He's the only one with the military history. So it's like, right, you want to come for me? Like, you better, how about you go check your backyard? And it's like, because it digs deeper into Reacher of like, the more time that's passing, the more information it comes up, the more it seems like, yes, Swan is a part of this. We'll see if that ends up being the case or not. Maybe it's not, but it's not looking good. But I feel like there's probably going to be some wiggle room where it's not what you think it is. It's just because they're leaning into it too hard to be Swan, but it might just be straight up like, no, it is Swan, but it feels like it's too, like, nah, it's Swan, that is like, it's too much of a red herring. But it might be a double bluff to make you think, well, you might overthink it thinking that is the case, when in actuality, no, it's simple. Arkham's Razor, like, no, it's simple, like, yeah, he's responsible, but I don't think so, but we'll see. Obviously, they had a shooter at the funeral. Well, actually, two. And luckily, our squad took him down. Reacher acted as distraction where Neely, like, handgun in hand. We're a little distance away, but she got off that headshot. I love the last guy was like, oh, shit. I'm done. I'm like, dude, you're not even going to bother trying to, because you're supposed to be professionals, but it's like, yeah, like, it's not worth my life, so I'm bouncing, and Reacher, like, raced after him, and Russo pulls up in the car, and I love that, like, the entire shit-talking relationship they have. It's like, Russo, the pedal is on the right side. He's like, shut up. Do you want to drive? He's like, yeah, actually, I do. Takes his steering wheel and pushes down on the gas, and they crash, and it's just like, God, you were just, oh, get out of my ass. Like, you're such an annoyance. But yeah, like, he asked Russo to look the other way while he, like, strangles the guy. And I love he's like, all right, blink if you're going to give me information. The guy blinks, and Reacher just keeps choking him. He's blinking. I was like, oh, you poor bastard. So, it turns out it wasn't Langston that hired him. Turns out it was Swan. But once again, it could be a thing of someone's using Swan's name, but it's not actually him, because they haven't, I mean, yes, other than the biometrics and stuff like that, which, to be fair, that could have gotten swapped out at some point in time. So, like, that could just be someone else's biometrics up there, but because it could be someone using his identity, so that could be a strong possibility. It could be like, no, Swan's actually dead, and, because even the way that Langston talks about, he's like, yeah, when he was talking to AM, he's like, yeah, these are Swan's friends. It's like, that's why I get the feeling like Swan actually might be dead, or he might be somewhere and someone else is feeling, because it might be a thing of he didn't know, because Neely had kind of parsed out some theories, and Reacher was kind of like, yeah, that might be a possibility, that the strong possibility being that maybe he was kind of strapped for cash or whatever, and maybe he went to Franz because Franz, was taking care of a wife and child, but Franz was not about it, so he got the others involved, and now they all had to be removed from the board. So, like I said, I think it could just as easily be like someone pretending to be Swan. Because at no point has anyone, they haven't asked because they hear the name Tony Swan, they just assume Swan, but none of them have actually asked, what does the guy who, like, got you the job, like, how was it through, like, text, email, was it face to face? Like, and even if it's face to face, no one's asked, what did this guy look like? So, like I said, I think it's someone else using Tony's name. I think that's going to be the twist there. Because, I guess I say poor guy, he was there to kill all of them, so it's not that big of a loss, but the moment he shows up at the place where he's supposed to get the rest of his money for the hit, the place blows up, because it makes sense. Of course, a place would be booby-trapped to go off, because they need to, the whole thing's about tying up loose ends, and these guys would have been loose ends, so it's like, right, they complete the job, good on you, but you're going to die because we can't have you out there in the world for someone else to trace this back to us. So that's where things end up on that front. So some very, very interesting developments. I'm curious to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good